Last weekend, I spent 48 hours making a game with the sole purpose of learning C, so that when I show up to college, I'll be prepared as can be. This is the game, this is the code, and I'm the dev that made this monstrosity of spaghetti. It's definitely not the greatest game out there. In fact, it's not much more than a half-baked prototype, but I'm pretty proud of what I was able to make. Over the last several years, I found the best way to motivate myself is through game jams, and would you look at that, the mini jam edition number 214 just started. For this edition of the jam, there is both a theme and a limitation, which were machines and out of hand, respectively. Contestants were encouraged to imply both constraints to their game as sources of inspiration, but were required only to abide by the limitation, even if, as in my case, a connection was vague. Given the time crunch, and my desire to get working as soon as possible, I decided to go with my very first idea, transporting fireworks from one area to another without getting blown up. Since it's not generally a good idea to handle explosives with one's bare hands, I designated that job to conveyor belts, thereby fulfilling the jam's requirements. Since my goal was to learn C, I essentially had three choices for this jam: SDO3, Raylib, and Circle, though the latter seems to be oriented more towards 3D. Along with the PDF of a C textbook I found online at Sprite, I went with Raylib for my tools of choice, as seemed to be the easiest to get up and running. After just a few minutes of following the wiki, I had statically linked Raylib and was ready to get started with the actual game development. The first few hours were about what you would expect: creating a render texture to draw to, before scaling said render texture up to a viewable scale for clean pixelated rendering. Surprisingly, converting the mouse position to game coordinates was fairly easy. By indexing into an array of tiles by means of the fastest known method of traversing data, two for loops, I was able to give the player the ability to place down conveyor belts. But wait, what's that? Unlike object-oriented programming languages like Python or Java, C is what's known as a procedural and structured programming language. So instead of making tile or firework objects, I'll make structs which contain a series of members. The pointer to the struct, where the address and memory word is stored, points to the address of each of the struct's members in the order that they are declared. The array of tiles then allocates the necessary amount of memory and stores each struct successively within the array. After setting up the tile system, I entered the longest and hardest part of the challenge: actually getting the fireworks to follow the direction of the conveyors. Similar to the conveyor belts, I created an item struct and an array of items which were released on equal intervals. Each item had a directional property, and based on the property, it moved in any of the four cardinal directions. The trick was to get this directional property to update in time. I tried again, and again, and again. What's that you said? Animating the items between tiles wasn't in the original scope? Frick. Thankfully, the remaining tasks were pretty trivial, and at 1 p.m. on Sunday, I started the final grind towards getting some semblance of a game submitted before the impending deadline in 10 hours. After spending Saturday struggling within the wrath of my poor design choices, I started the day off by giving the prototype art a bit of an overhaul. After starting to experiment with pixel art almost 8 years ago, due to a severe lack of consistent practice, this is the best I could come up with. However, I'd still consider it to be somewhat passable for a game jam, and imported the new tile set and sprites into the game. Thanks to Raylib's load texture function, adding art was fairly trivial and quickly improved the appearance of the game. Descending back into the murky darkness of my code, I then spent the next several hours fixing bugs and adding what little polish I could to the game. Because C doesn't have functionality to throw an exception when an array is indexed out of bounds, past the memory that it controls, I ran into some undefined behavior, which I was luckily able to quickly fix with some simple bounds checking. I also added bombs that exploded after a set amount of time, yanked some music from Open Game Art, shout out to Matthew Pablo and Subspace Audio, before quickly throwing together a main menu, just in time to submit a Linux build to the jam page, a calm 5 minutes and 45 seconds before the deadline. If you're interested in playing the game, you can find it on my itch.io page at the link in the description. Bye!